When I think about the 80s, I don't think about them as a time I personally lived through. I'm 30 years old, so I experienced a decade only indirectly. But somehow the 80s were always present in my life, because my father was a big fan of that era. Through him, I grew up with the music, the films, the atmosphere, and this is very specific energy that the 80s seemed to have. And even as a kid, I could feel that this decade was different. It felt bigger, sharper, and more dramatic. More confident, everything about it had a strong identity, the music sounded larger than life, the movies felt iconic, and the style had a kind of boldness that is hard to ignore. And I think that's also why the 80s never really disappeared. Even today, so many people are still drawn to the music, the films, the whole visual world of that time, because there is something about the 80s that keeps coming back. It had character, it had atmosphere, and it had a very clear image of what a man's success, power and style could look like. And that's exactly why I want you to talk about it, because 80s style was never about clothing. It was about ambition, status, masculinity and presence. This was not a quiet decade. The man did not dress quietly either. To understand why 80s style looked in a way it did, you first have to understand what the decade was about. Because the fashion didn't come out of nowhere, it reflected the mindset of the time. The 80s were obsessed with success, with money, with status, with ambition, with becoming someone. Men dressed to project power, stronger silhouettes, bigger shoulders, sharper lines and more expensive clothing fabrics. That's why the style feels so memorable today. It wasn't just fashion, it was visual storytelling, and once you look at it that way, you realize something important. The 80s were not just one style, they were a set of distinct masculine identities. Men didn't just dress well, they dressed like they belonged to a certain world, like they were playing a role. And when you break it down, a few clear archetypes appear. The first one is the Wall Street guy. The man of business, controlled, ambitious, disciplined. This is the man who wins inside the system. The perfect example of this, Michael Douglas in Wall Street. Everything about this style is sharp, intentional, strong, structured suits, suspenders, contrast color shirts, ties, polished shoes. Nothing is accidental. Every detail communicated authority. And this worked because success became visible. You didn't just have money, you looked like you had money. Clothing became a signal of power. Then you have a completely different type of man, the tropical playboy. This is where Miami Vice becomes so important, especially Sonny Crockett, because he represented something new. A form of masculinity that was still elegant but no longer rigid. He showed that tailoring didn't have to belong to the office. Blazers with t-shirts, blazers with polos, light tailoring, pleated trousers, loafers without socks, open collars. It was elegant but relaxed. That changed menswear completely. Because suddenly, elegance became part of a lifestyle, not just business. Then there is a darker and more extreme version of 80s masculinity. The 80s gangsters. The clearest example is Tony Montana in Scarface. This is ambition without limits, power without restrained, masculinity that wants to be seen, felt and feared, and the clothing reflects that. Bold suits, open shirts, gold jewelry, shiny fabrics, strong colors, nothing subtle. And that was exactly the point, because this version of 80s masculinity was about visible transformation, about showing the world you had become powerful. And finally, there is a more refined archetype that many people overlook, the soft luxury man. A strong example is Richard Gere in American Gigolo. This is a completely different kind of masculinity. Not loud, not aggressive, not trying to dominate the room, but still very intentional. His style is based on soft tailoring, fluid fabrics, neutral tones and clean silhouettes. This introduced a kind of masculine elegance that relied on refinement instead of dominance. And in many ways, this feels surprisingly modern. Now the real question is, what can we actually take from all of this today? There is a lot to learn. Take the Wall Street guy. What worked there was the structure and clarity. You don't need suspenders and contrast colors today, but you can absolutely take the idea of structure, a well-fitted blazer, trousers that hold their shape, shirts that feel intentional, that still creates authority. What you leave behind is the exaggeration. No oversized shoulders, no aggressive corporate costume. The goal today is quiet authority. Then the tropical playboy. This is probably the easiest one to translate. Because honestly, a lot of still works. Blazer with a polo, blazer with a t-shirt, lightweight trousers, loafers without visible socks. That formula still looks excellent. Then the 80s gangster. This one is trickier. What still works is the confidence. The open collar, the slightly more sensual masculine energy, but what does not work is the excess. Too much jewelry, too much shine, too much obvious display of wealth. That's where power becomes performance. And then the soft luxury man, this is probably the closest to modern masculine elegance. Soft tailoring, relaxed but intentional silhouettes, neutral palettes, understated luxury. This translates almost directly, and if you look at all of these examples together, one thing becomes very clear. The 80s may have been excessive and a lot of details should stay in the past. But that decade still understood something many men today are missing. Style becomes powerful when it's connected to identity. That is the real lesson. Because what made this man memorable was not just the clothes. It was every choice felt connected to a specific image of masculinity. Authority, ease, danger, refinement, and even when it was exaggerated, it was clear. And that clarity is exactly what modern menswear often lacks. Today, a lot of men have more clothing than ever before, but less identity in the way they dressed. Everything becomes casual, everything becomes safe, everything becomes so neutral that nothing really says anything anymore. They understood that clothing could communicate ambition, confidence, sensuality, discipline, self-control, and that is the part worth taking today. You should reflect something with your dress. You're trying to become somebody. That is what made the best 80s style so strong. And that is also what still makes masculine elegance work today. Because real style is not about copying another decade. It is about understanding what gave it power. Because beneath all the excess, they understood something timeless. Men don't just want to be dressed, they want to look like they mean something. Thanks for watching, see you in another video, and goodbye.